The taste of victory is sweeter than revenge. As I stand here, pen hovering over the final document, I can't help but smile at the irony. While my husband James is probably whispering sweet nothings to his mistress in some overpriced Seattle hotel, I'm about to sign the papers for his dream house, the historic Victorian mansion he's been obsessing over for the past 3 years. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destruction. It's about taking what matters most. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, the crushing weight of discovering that your entire life has been built on lies, then you know that moment when pain transforms into power. This is my story of reclaiming not just my life, but something far more precious: my sense of worth. The morning started like any other in our sleek Belltown condo. The smell of fresh coffee, the sound of James rushing to get ready for another early meeting, and the familiar kiss on my cheek that had grown so mechanical over our 6 years of marriage. But this morning was different. This morning I knew exactly where he was going, and more importantly, I knew exactly what I was about to do. I watched him leave, his expensive briefcase in hand, designer shoes clicking against the hardwood floors. He had no idea that I had already seen the text messages, discovered the hotel reservations, and pieced together months of lies. My husband, the successful real estate developer, thought he was so clever. But while he was planning his getaway, with Becky, his gorgeous interior designer, I was planning something that would hit him where it truly hurt: his pride and his lifelong dream. The Victorian mansion on Queen Anne Hill wasn't just a house to James, it was his obsession. Every Sunday for the past 3 years, he would drive us past it, pointing out the intricate woodwork, the panoramic view of Puget Sound, the potential it held. One day, he would say, his eyes gleaming with ambition, "That house will be ours." What he didn't know was that today, it would become mine. I remember the first time he showed me the house. It was a crisp autumn morning, and the fog was just lifting off the sound. The morning light hit the stained glass windows, casting rainbow shadows on the wraparound porch. James was like a child at Christmas, rattling off facts about its history, the original owner, the architectural details. I had never seen him so passionate about anything, except maybe his own reflection. The irony doesn't escape me that it was his job as a real estate developer that introduced him to Becky. She was hired to stage one of his luxury properties, and apparently, their professional relationship blossomed into something more. They thought they were being discreet with their coffee meetings at the Daily Grind, their business dinners that ran late into the night. But Seattle isn't as big as they think, and karma has a way of bringing secrets to light. As I sit here in my lawyer's office, the weight of the fountain pen feels right in my hand. The morning sun streams through the windows of the high-rise, illuminating the stack of papers before me. My financial advisor assured me that liquidating my separate investments for this purchase was a bold but calculating move. The house would likely double in value with the way the Seattle market was heading. Sometimes the best business decisions come from the heart, or from sweet, sweet revenge. I think about James's face when he realizes what I've done. The house he's been dreaming of, the one he's been saving for, planning for, obsessing over, now belongs to me. By the time he returns from his little rendezvous with Becky, the papers will be signed, the keys will be in my hand, and his dream will be my new beginning. If you're wondering how a marketing executive managed to outmaneuver a real estate developer at his own game, well, let's just say that hell hath no fury like a woman who's been underestimated. While James was busy deleting text messages and covering his tracks, I was meeting with real estate agents, securing financing, and making sure I would be the first to know when the house hit the market. But this isn't just a story about buying a house or getting revenge. It's about the moment a woman realizes her worth isn't tied to the man who betrayed her. It's about turning pain into power, betrayal into opportunity, and taking control of your own story. Don't forget to subscribe to hear what happens next. How James reacts when he discovers his dream house is now my victory mansion, and how sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. In your husband's dream home. The view from this office is remarkable, almost as impressive as the one I'll have from my new master bedroom. As I sign my name on the final line, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. This isn't the ending I expected for my marriage, but it's the beginning I chose for myself. And as I take one last look at the Seattle skyline, I know that this is just the first chapter of my new life. If you want to hear how this story unfolds, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, when James Anderson returns from his romantic getaway to find out his wife now owns his dream house, the real drama is just beginning. The first time I met James Anderson, I wasn't looking for love. It was a rainy Tuesday morning at Pike Place Market, and I was rushing to grab coffee before my marketing presentation. He was standing by the original Starbucks, holding an umbrella, over a stack of blueprints, his suit getting soaked as he studied what looked like building plans. When I slipped on the wet cobblestones, he caught me before I could fall, sacrificing his blueprints to the puddles in the process. We laughed about it over coffee, him in his drenched designer suit, me with a run in my stockings, both of us trading stories about our morning mishaps. He was charming in that effortless way that successful men often are, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. I remember thinking how different he seemed from the other men I'd dated, how genuine his interest appeared to be in my work and my dreams. Our courtship was a whirlwind of Seattle's finest experiences. Sunset dinners at the Space Needle, weekend trips to tiny vineyards in Woodinville, impromptu picnics at Cary Park where we'd watch the city lights come alive. James had a way of making every moment feel special, choreographed almost, like scenes from a perfect romance movie. He knew all the best restaurants, the hidden gems of the city, and he always seemed to have the right connections to get us the best tables, the perfect views. Looking back now, I should have seen how calculated it all was. James didn't just plan dates, he orchestrated experiences. Everything in his life was about presentation, about creating the perfect image. Our wedding was no exception. A lavish affair at the Georgian restaurant, with hand-calligraphed invitations and centerpieces that cost more than my first car. He had opinions about everything, from the shade of white for my dress to the exact timing of our first dance. I thought it was sweet then, how much he cared about the details. Now I realize he was just directing another performance. The early years of our marriage were good, or at least they seemed that way. We moved into a modern condo in Belltown, all glass and steel and spectacular views. James was rising quickly in his real estate development firm, and I was making a name for myself in digital marketing. We were that couple that other couples envied. Successful, attractive, apparently perfect. Sunday brunches, charity galas, weekend getaways to Vancouver. We collected experiences like trophies, each one carefully photographed and shared, each one another brick in the wall of our picture-perfect life. But it was the quiet moments that I cherished most, the unscripted ones that James couldn't control. Like the morning we got caught in an unexpected snowstorm and ended up building tiny snowmen on our balcony. Or the night our power went out, and we ate takeout by candlelight, telling ghost stories like teenagers. Those were the moments when James felt real to me, when his carefully maintained facade would crack just enough to let me see the man underneath. We had our routines, comfortable, patterns that shaped our days. Every morning, James would make coffee while I checked emails. He'd kiss me goodbye before heading to the office, always the same spot on my right cheek, always with the same subtle scent of his expensive cologne. In the evenings, we'd talk about our days over whatever trendy new restaurant he'd discovered, or sometimes we'd cook together in our sleek kitchen, jazz playing in the background. The first time James showed me the Victorian mansion on Queen Anne Hill, I thought he was joking. The house was massive, a testament to old Seattle money with its intricate woodwork and sprawling gardens. It needed work, a lot of work. But James saw past the peeling paint and overgrown landscaping. He saw potential, he said, a chance to restore something magnificent. I saw a money pit, but I loved how passionate he was about it. His eyes would light up every time we drove past, and he'd launch into detailed plans about what he would do with each room. That house became his obsession, his ultimate goal. He'd drag me to open houses in the neighborhood, researching property values and renovation costs. He started talking about it at dinner parties, showing photos to our friends, describing his vision in vivid detail. The more he talked about it, the more I started to see it too. Christmas mornings in the grand living room, summer parties in the garden, our future children running up and down the magnificent staircase. What I didn't see was how the house represented everything James valued most: status, success, the appearance of perfection. It wasn't about creating a home. It was about creating an impression. The mansion would be the ultimate testament to his success, a physical manifestation of his carefully crafted image. He didn't just want to own it, he wanted to conquer it, to put his mark on it, to show the world that he had arrived. Our friends thought we were the perfect couple. James was always attentive in public, his hand at the small of my back, remembering to pull out my chair, ordering my favorite wines. He knew how to play the role of devoted husband just as well as he played the role of successful businessman. We hosted dinner parties where everything was immaculate: the food, the wine pairings, the conversation. It was all part of the performance, the carefully maintained illusion of a perfect life. Even our fights were choreographed, contained within the boundaries of what James considered acceptable. He never raised his voice, never lost control. Instead, he would become cold, distant, wielding silence like a weapon. He had a way of making me feel like I was always slightly wrong, slightly less than what he expected. But he would always make up for it with grand gestures, expensive gifts, surprise weekends away, elaborate apologies that felt more like productions than genuine remorse. The night James first mentioned Becky Cooper, I didn't think anything of it. She was just another interior designer he was working with, one of many professionals who orbited his world. He mentioned her in passing, praising her eye for detail, her understanding of his vision. I even met her once at a charity gala, tall, elegant, with the kind of effortless style that takes hours to perfect. She complimented my dress, asked about my work, played her part perfectly in the ongoing performance that was my life with James. If someone had told me then what was coming, I wouldn't have believed them. I was still too caught up in the illusion, too invested in the story we were telling the world. But looking back now, I can see the hairline cracks in our perfect facade, the subtle signs that everything was not as it seemed. The way James's phone would light up at odd hours, how he started having more early meetings, more late nights at the office. The slight changes in his routine, the new cologne, the fresh haircuts that appeared between his regular appointments. But that was before everything changed, before the carefully constructed set of our marriage began to crumble. Before I discovered that sometimes the most important roles we play are the ones we never rehearsed for. Before I learned that the best stories aren't the ones we plan, but the ones we live when all our plans fall apart. The changes were so subtle at first, I almost convinced myself I was imagining things. It started with the little rituals that had once been sacred, like our Sunday morning coffee on the balcony. James began taking calls during these moments, stepping inside with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low tones about property values and renovation costs. He'd wave apologetically, mouthing "important client" as our precious time together slipped away. His schedule grew increasingly unpredictable. The early meetings became earlier, the late nights stretched longer. When I'd text to ask about dinner plans, his responses would come hours later, always with a perfectly reasonable explanation. A client emergency, a permit issue, a last-minute presentation. Each excuse was plausible, each delay justified, but something felt off in a way I couldn't quite name. The Georgian restaurant where we'd celebrated every anniversary since our wedding saw us less and less. James started suggesting newer places, trendier spots where the lighting was dimmer and the crowds were younger. He'd spend more time checking his phone than talking to me, his attention scattered like light through a prism. When I'd mention it, he'd laugh it off, calling me paranoid, reminding me how busy things were at work. Even his passion for the Victorian mansion began to shift. The Sunday drives past the house became less frequent, his animated discussions about renovation plans more sporadic. When I'd bring it up, trying to engage him in what had once been his favorite topic, he'd seem distracted, almost irritated. "We'll get there eventually," he'd say, his tone dismissive, as if the dream that had consumed him for years was suddenly just another item on a long to-do list. The first time I noticed the new cologne, it was just a whisper of unfamiliar scent on his collar. Different from his signature fragrance, something lighter, more modern. When I mentioned it, he shrugged it off. A sample from the department store, something he was trying out. But it lingered in my mind, that small change, that tiny deviation from his usual meticulous routine. His wardrobe began to evolve too. Subtle changes, slimmer cuts, bolder colors, designer labels I didn't recognize. The credit card bills showed more frequent visits to high-end boutiques. "Image is everything in real estate," he'd explain, not meeting my eyes. "Clients expect a certain look." But the James I knew had always been conservative in his tastes, preferring classic styles to fashion trends. The gym became a new priority. Early morning sessions turned into evening workouts that stretched past dinner time. He started counting calories, something he'd never cared about before. His body was changing, becoming leaner, more defined. Any other wife might have been pleased, but each new muscle felt like another brick in the wall growing between us. Our conversations began to feel scripted, like business meetings where we exchanged information rather than shared our lives. He stopped asking about my day, stopped sharing the small details that had once made up the fabric of our relationship. When I'd try to dig deeper, he'd deflect with practiced ease, turning the conversation to safe topics: work, the weather, plans for the weekend that we both knew would probably be canceled. The intimacy started fading too, replaced by a polite distance that felt foreign in our own home. The casual touches, the spontaneous kisses, the playful moments that had once punctuated our days, all began to disappear. James was physically present but emotionally elsewhere, his mind seemingly occupied with thoughts he wouldn't share. His phone became an extension of his hand, a constant companion that demanded more attention than I did. He'd take calls in another room, his voice too low to hear. Text messages would arrive late at night, the screen carefully angled away from my view. When I'd walk into his home office, he'd quickly switch tabs on his computer, his movements just a fraction too hurried to be casual. The changes in his schedule became more pronounced. Client meetings that used to take an hour now stretched to 3. Site visits that typically happened during the day started occurring in the evening. He began traveling more frequently, quick trips to Portland or Vancouver that he'd mentioned last minute, always with perfectly reasonable explanations that somehow felt hollow. Even his attitude toward our future started to shift. Conversations about having children, once filled with excitement and plans, became vague and non-committal. "Let's wait until the timing is right," he'd say, though we'd been waiting for the perfect moment for years. The house on Queen Anne Hill, once the symbol of our future together, was mentioned less and less, as if the dream itself was fading, along with everything else. I started noticing small expenses that didn't quite add up. Dinner receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of, charges from hotels in the city where we lived. When I'd ask, James always had an explanation. Business dinners, client meetings, a quiet place to work when the office was too distracting. Each explanation was reasonable, logical, utterly believable on its own. But together, they formed a pattern I didn't want to see. The dinner parties we used to host regularly became less frequent, then stopped altogether. James always had a reason: too busy, too tired, too much work to prepare for the next day. Our social circle began to shrink, limited to carefully orchestrated appearances at business functions where James would perform the role of devoted husband with practiced precision. His friends started acting differently around me too. Slight hesitations in conversation, awkward pauses when certain topics came up. At corporate events, I'd catch sympathetic glances from colleagues' wives, their expressions carrying a weight. I wasn't ready to understand. They knew something I didn't, or perhaps something I wasn't ready to admit I already knew. The cleaning lady found a receipt in his jacket pocket one day. A jewelry store I didn't recognize, a purchase I never saw. When I asked about it, James dismissed it casually, a gift for his mother's upcoming birthday. But his mother's birthday wasn't for months, and the date on the receipt was from 2 weeks ago. Another small detail that didn't quite fit, another piece of the puzzle I was unconsciously assembling. Then there were the late-night showers, something he'd never done before. The fresh shirt he'd change into before heading to client meetings. The business cards from new restaurants and hotels that would fall out of his pockets. The growing collection of small inconsistencies that I filed away, each one insignificant on its own, but together telling a story I wasn't ready to read. At night, lying beside him yet feeling miles apart, I'd watch him sleep and wonder what had changed. Was it me? Had I become too predictable? Too comfortable? Had I missed something obvious? Some crucial moment when everything started to shift? The questions would swirl in my mind, keeping me awake long after he'd drifted off, his back turned to my side of the bed. The early tremors of change were subtle, like the first hairline cracks in a foundation. Easy to overlook, easy to explain away. But they were there, accumulating day by day, week by week, building toward a revelation I couldn't yet imagine. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice I wasn't ready to hear was whispering that nothing would ever be the same again. Truth has a way of revealing itself in the most ordinary moments. Mine came on a Wednesday afternoon at the Daily Grind, where I'd stopped to grab a coffee between meetings. I wasn't supposed to be there. My usual coffee shop was closed for renovations. As I waited in line, I heard a familiar laugh, the kind that makes you turn your head without thinking. There, in the corner by the window, sat Becky Cooper, her hand resting casually on James's arm as he leaned in close to whisper something in her ear. Time seemed to stop. The barista's voice faded into background noise, the clatter of cups and conversation dimming to a distant hum. I watched as James's fingers intertwined with hers, watched the intimate way they shared a single muffin, watched how comfortable they were in their secret little world. This wasn't a business meeting. This wasn't professional. This was the kind of familiarity that only comes from months of stolen moments and hidden encounters. My feet carried me out of the coffee shop before either of them noticed me. The Seattle rain had started, but I barely felt it. My mind was racing, connecting dots I'd been deliberately ignoring for months. The late meetings, the new cologne, the changed passwords on his phone. They all suddenly made perfect sense. The truth I'd been avoiding crashed over me like a wave, leaving me gasping for air on the sidewalk outside. I made it back to my office somehow, closed the door, and sat at my desk staring at nothing. My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop, fingers moving automatically to our shared cloud storage. James had always been meticulous about his digital life, but he'd forgotten about the automatic backup of his phone, a security measure we'd set up years ago after he'd lost important client contacts. The evidence was there, laid out in neat, digital rows, hundreds of text messages, late-night phone calls, hotel reservations, restaurant receipts, photos of them together in places we used to go, looking happy, looking in love. Each new discovery was like a knife twisting deeper. There were messages about their future together, about their plans, about how they would handle the situation. Me. The Victorian mansion came up in their conversations too. messages about how they would renovate it together, how Becky's design expertise would transform it into their dream home. My dream home. Our dream home. The home that James and I had talked about for years, planned for, saved for. Now it was being reimagined in messages between my husband and his mistress. I printed everything. Every message, every receipt, every piece of evidence that proved what I already knew in my heart. The printer hummed steadily, spitting out page after page of my husband's betrayal. I organized them chronologically, watching their relationship unfold in black and white. It had started 8 months ago, right after Becky was hired to stage one of James's luxury properties. Their relationship had progressed quickly from professional to personal. Coffee meetings turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekend getaways disguised as business trips. They were careful at first, but grew bolder as time went on. They had inside jokes, pet names, shared dreams. They had a whole life together, running parallel to the life James shared with me. The final blow came in the form of an email chain about an upcoming trip to Napa Valley. James had told me he had a development conference in Portland that weekend. The truth was, he had planned a romantic getaway with Becky to celebrate their 8-month anniversary. They had reservations at exclusive wineries, a suite at a luxury resort, even dinner reservations at French Laundry. He had planned every detail with the same precision he once used to plan our dates. I sat there for hours, reading and rereading, letting the full weight of the betrayal sink in. It wasn't just the affair, it was the calculated nature of it all. The careful planning, the deliberate deception, the way they had turned our life together into nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to their happiness. Every memory I had of the past 8 months was now tainted, filtered through the lens of this new reality. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Working late tonight, don't wait up." I stared at the message, thinking about how many times I'd received similar texts over the past months, how many times I'd accepted his excuses without question. Now I knew he would be with her, probably at their favorite restaurant, planning their future in our dream house. The sun was setting when I finally left the office, casting long shadows across the Seattle skyline. I drove home in a daze, the file of evidence sitting heavy in my bag. Our condo, once a sanctuary, felt like a museum of lies. Every surface held memories that were now suspect. Had they been here, in our home? Had they laughed about me while sitting on our couch, drinking our wine? I opened a bottle of wine, an expensive one James had been saving for a special occasion, and began to really look at our home, really see it. The photos on the walls, carefully curated to show our perfect life. The closet full of James's meticulously organized clothes, some still carrying that unfamiliar cologne. The kitchen where we used to cook together, now more often empty than not. As I moved through the rooms, I noticed things I'd been blind to before. A woman's long blonde hair on the bathroom floor. Becky's shade, not mine. A lipstick smudge on one of James's white shirts pushed to the back of the laundry hamper. A hotel notepad in his office drawer from a place we'd never stayed. The evidence had been there all along, waiting for me to open my eyes and see it. My wedding ring felt heavy on my finger, a symbol of promises that now meant nothing. I slipped it off and watched it catch the last rays of sunlight. 6 years of marriage, reduced to a band of gold that suddenly seemed as hollow as the vows it represented. The future we had planned together, the life we had built, the dreams we had shared. All of it was built on a foundation of lies. The Victorian mansion on Queen Anne Hill loomed in my thoughts. Our supposed future home, the symbol of everything we had worked toward, was now just another piece of his betrayal. I pulled up the real estate listing on my phone, staring at the familiar facade. The price tag that had once seemed daunting now looked like the cost of freedom. The thought that had been forming in the back of my mind all afternoon suddenly crystallized into a plan. I spent the night going through our finances, our investments, our savings. James had always handled the money, but I wasn't naive. I had my own accounts, my own investments, my own resources. And more importantly, I had something he didn't expect: the element of surprise. As I sat there in our darkened living room, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal, I began to plan my revenge. It wouldn't be loud or dramatic. It would be calculated, precise, and absolutely devastating, just like him. Grief comes in waves, but clarity emerges in silence. The week after discovering James's affair, I moved through our life like a ghost, watching everything with new eyes. Each morning, I'd observe him perform his carefully choreographed routine, the precise way he'd adjust his tie, the practiced kiss on my cheek, the rehearsed explanation for another late night at the office. Only now, I saw the performance for what it was. My office became my sanctuary, a place where I could think clearly without the suffocating weight of our shared spaces. I threw myself into research, approaching my situation like I would any marketing campaign. Knowledge is power, and I needed every advantage I could get. Real estate laws, property values, market trends. I absorbed it all, building my arsenal, piece by piece. The Victorian Mansion's listing haunted my browser history. I studied every photo, every detail, every disclosure document I could access. The price tag that had once seemed impossible now felt like the cost of redemption. I ran the numbers again and again, my savings, my investments, my future projections. The math was tight but possible, especially if I liquidated my tech company, shares that had been quietly growing over the years. During lunch breaks, I'd drive to Queen Anne Hill, parking across from the mansion. Sometimes I'd sit there for hours, watching the play of light across its windows, imagining different futures than the one James and I had planned. The house had always been his obsession, his symbol of success. But as I sat there day after day, it began to transform in my mind. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was an opportunity, a statement, a weapon. Each evening, I'd return home to play my part in our crumbling marriage. I'd listen to James's elaborate lies about client meetings and project deadlines, nodding at all the right moments. When he'd mention Becky's name casually in conversation, I'd keep my face carefully neutral, noting how he'd watch for my reaction from the corner of his eye. The performances were exhausting, but necessary. I needed time to plan, to prepare, to position myself perfectly. Sleep became elusive, but the quiet hours of night proved valuable. While James slept soundly beside me, I'd review our financial records, tracing the path of his deception through credit card statements and bank transfers. He was clever, but not as clever as he thought. The evidence of his affair was there in the data: hotel charges, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases. Each discovery strengthened my resolve. I started having coffee with Diana, our real estate agent, under the guise of general market research. She didn't know about James's affair, but she knew the Queen Anne property intimately. Over lattes at quiet cafes far from James's usual haunts, she shared insights about the seller's situation, the property's history, the potential negotiating points. Each conversation was another piece in my growing strategy. The mansion's current owners were divorcing, an irony that wasn't lost on me. They needed a quick sale, and their asking price, while steep, was negotiable. Diana mentioned that several developers had shown interest, but the owners preferred the idea of selling to someone who would preserve the home's historic character. I filed this information away, another card to play when the time was right. My own finances required careful consideration. I'd always maintained separate accounts alongside our joint ones, a habit from my independent days that James had occasionally teased me about. Now, those separate accounts represented freedom. I met with my financial advisor, exploring options for liquidating investments without raising red flags. The timing needed to be perfect, the execution flawless. Walking through our condo became an exercise in detachment. The space that had once felt like home now seemed like a movie set, with every object telling the story of our fabricated life together. The photos on the walls, the shared belongings, the carefully curated decor, all of it felt hollow. I started mentally cataloging what was truly mine, what I would take when the time came to leave. James's absences grew longer, his excuses more elaborate. Each time he left, I'd use the solitude to strengthen my plan. I photographed documents, secured copies of important papers, gathered evidence of his infidelity. Everything was methodically organized and stored in multiple secure locations. I wouldn't be caught unprepared when the moment of truth arrived. The Victorian mansion became my obsession, but in a different way than it had been James's. While he had seen it as a trophy, a symbol of his success, I began to see it as liberation. Its grand rooms and ornate details represented not just a home, but a future free from lies. I studied the property listings in the area, understanding the market dynamics, preparing myself to act when the opportunity arose. My marketing expertise proved invaluable as I crafted my approach. I knew the importance of timing, of presentation, of controlling the narrative. Each interaction with James, with Diana, with my financial advisors was carefully considered. I was building a story, setting the stage for a revelation that would shake the foundations of James's carefully constructed world. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy at home. Sharing meals, making small talk, going through the motions of married life while carrying the weight of what I knew. Sometimes I'd catch James looking at me thoughtfully, as if trying to read beneath my composed surface. In those moments, I'd smile and ask about his day, watching him launch into another carefully constructed lie. At night, when sleep wouldn't come, I'd imagine different scenarios for how everything would play out. The moment James realized what I'd done, the look on his face when he understood that his dream home, the symbol of everything he'd worked for, had slipped through his fingers. Sometimes I'd imagine Becky's reaction too, when she realized their carefully planned future had evaporated. The quiet assessment period was necessary, but it was also transformative. Each day spent watching, waiting, and planning changed me. The anger and hurt were still there, but they had crystallized into something harder, something more purposeful. I wasn't just James's wife anymore, living in reaction to his decisions. I was becoming someone new, someone who understood that the best revenge isn't served hot with drama and tears, but cold with precision and patience. Planning revenge is like playing chess. Every move must be calculated, every consequence considered. My first meeting with the divorce attorney took place in a small office overlooking Elliott Bay. Margaret Chen had a reputation for being ruthless but discreet, exactly what I needed. As I laid out the evidence of James's affair, she nodded methodically, her expression revealing nothing. "The Victorian mansion is key," I explained, spreading out the property details across her desk. "James has been eyeing it for years. He and Becky have been planning their future there." Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly as she examined the listing. Her next words would shape my entire strategy. "Purchasing the property before filing for divorce could be risky," she cautioned. "But if we structure it correctly, using your separate assets, it could be a powerful move." She began outlining the legal frameworks we'd need to navigate. Property. Acquisition during marriage, separate versus community property, the implications of timing. Each detail needed to be perfect. The next step was securing financing. My meeting with Robert, my financial advisor, lasted hours as we restructured my investment portfolio. "Your tech company shares have tripled in value," he noted, pulling up the charts. "Liquidating them now, combined with your other investments, could give you the down payment you need." We ran scenarios, calculated risks, explored every financial lie angle. Diana, my real estate agent, proved invaluable in the next phase. Over dinner at a quiet restaurant in Ballard, she shared insider information about the mansion's sellers. "They're motivated to sell quickly," she whispered. "The divorce is getting messy, and they want to close before the end of the month." The timeline was tight, but workable. Diana also confirmed my suspicion. James had recently inquired about the property through his own channels. The plan began taking shape, like a complex tapestry. Each thread needed to be woven carefully, each color chosen with purpose. I created a secure email account, set up a separate phone line, established new banking relationships at a different institution. Everything needed to be compartmentalized, protected from James's potential discovery. Timing would be crucial. James had planned a weekend trip to Napa with Becky. Their messages detailed every romantic moment they'd scheduled. This would be my window of opportunity. While they were sipping wine in California, I would be signing papers in Seattle, claiming the very house they'd been dreaming about. The logistics required military precision. I scheduled meetings with the seller's attorney, arranged for property inspections, and coordinated with the title company. Each appointment was carefully timed to avoid any overlap with James's regular routines or business contacts. Seattle may be a big city, but the real estate community is surprisingly small. Margaret helped me draft a series of documents protecting my interests. Once the purchase is complete, she explained, we'll file the divorce papers immediately. The timing needs to be perfect. We want him served right after he discovers you've bought the house. She smiled slightly, appreciating the elegance of the plan. I spent hours studying the mansion's history, understanding its architectural significance, learning about its unique features. Knowledge that would prove I was a serious buyer, interested in preservation, not just another developer looking to maximize profit. The current owner's preference for a preservation-minded buyer would work in my favor. The financial arrangements were complex but concealed within perfectly legal frameworks. Robert helped me structure the purchase in a way that would be difficult to challenge later. We'll use your separate property, he explained. Funds that can be clearly traced to your pre-marriage assets and independent earnings. Every dollar needed to be accounted for. Every transaction documented. Diana orchestrated the property viewings with precision. We'll schedule the final walkthrough for Friday morning, she confirmed, while James is flying to Napa. The pieces were falling into place, each movement choreographed like a dance. The sellers had already responded positively to my offer, impressed by the quick closing timeline and preservation commitments. I began preparing for the aftermath as well. New security systems were researched, locksmith services contacted, plans made for immediate changes once the property was mine. The mansion's grand gates would need new access codes, its ancient locks, new keys. No detail was too small to consider. My office became command central for the operation. Files were organized, documents prepared, contingencies planned. Each morning, I arrived earlier than usual, using the quiet hours to coordinate the various aspects of my plan. The peaceful moments before dawn became my time to review and refine every detail. The mansion itself seemed to be cooperating. During one final drive-by, I noticed a price-reduced sign had appeared. Diana confirmed the sellers had dropped their asking price significantly, eager to close before their own divorce proceedings complicated matters further. Sometimes the universe has a way of offering exactly what you need. I scheduled a private meeting with my boss, explaining that I would need some personal time in the coming weeks. She was understanding, though I kept the details vague. Having my professional life secured was crucial. Independence would require more than just property ownership. The week before execution, I methodically went through our condo, photographing every room, documenting every possession. Margaret had advised this step, knowing that questions of property division would eventually arise. The process felt like cataloging artifacts from a past life, each image a record of what I was leaving behind. As the plan crystallized, I found myself growing calmer. The initial storm of emotions had settled into a steady resolve. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about justice, about taking control of my own story. The mansion wasn't just a house, it was my declaration of independence. My final preparation was setting up a new home office in a temporary location, a small serviced office space downtown, away from my usual haunts, where I could manage the aftermath of my plan without interference. Sometimes the best moves are made from unexpected positions. The night before James left for Napa, I watched him pack his bag, listened to his elaborate lie about the Portland conference, and felt nothing but a quiet certainty. Tomorrow, he would board a plane with his mistress, thinking he was one step ahead. But while he was planning his romantic weekend, I would be signing the papers that would change everything. The chess pieces were in position. The game was about to begin. Morning light filtered through the fog as I stood in front of the Victorian mansion, its towering presence both intimidating and welcoming. James's flight to Portland, actually to Napa with Becky, had taken off an hour ago. Diana stood beside me, keys in hand, ready for the final walkthrough before closing. The air felt electric with possibility. Inside, my footsteps echoed. On the original hardwood floors, each sound a reminder that this moment was real. The grand foyer opened up before me, its carved wooden staircase spiraling upward like a pathway to a new life. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the walls that James and Becky had planned to paint in their carefully chosen colors. Diana led me through each room, pointing out features and recent updates, but I barely heard her. My mind was cataloging different details: the spot where James had once described placing their future Christmas tree, the kitchen he'd planned to remodel to Becky's specifications, the master suite where they'd imagined starting their new life together. Each space now held a different kind of promise. The home office, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and bay window overlooking the sound, would be my command center. I could already picture my laptop on the antique desk, my files, organized in the built-in cabinets. This room, which James had intended for his own use, would become the headquarters of my new beginning. My phone buzzed, a text from Margaret confirming that everything was ready at the title company. The sellers had arrived early, eager to close this chapter of their own lives. The symmetry wasn't lost on me, their divorce creating the opportunity for my liberation. Sometimes endings and beginnings are inextricably linked. The final signatures took less than 30 minutes. Each document represented another strand of freedom, another step toward reclaiming my life. The sellers seemed relieved, perhaps recognizing in me a kindred spirit, someone else who understood that sometimes the biggest changes come disguised as real estate transactions. Walking out of the title company, keys in hand, I felt lighter somehow. Diana hugged me, whispering congratulations, but her eyes held a knowing look. She'd seen enough real estate deals to recognize when a property purchase meant more than just a change of address. This was about claiming territory, about marking new boundaries. My next stop was the locksmith. I'd arranged for every lock-in, the house to be changed immediately, every security code updated, every access point secured. No one, especially not James, would have entry without my explicit permission. The symbolism of changing locks wasn't lost on me. I was securing more than just a house. The security company arrived next, installing a state-of-the-art system complete with cameras and remote monitoring. Each device represented another layer of protection, another barrier between my new life and the old one I was leaving behind. The technician walked me through the features, but I was already thinking ahead to James's reaction when his key wouldn't work. Afternoon sun illuminated the master bedroom as I began unpacking my first box. Not clothes or kitchen items, but documents. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered, every record of James's betrayal, found its home in the antique safe I'd had installed behind a panel in the walk-in closet. Even here, in my moment of triumph, I was planning for contingencies. My phone remained silent. No messages from James, no questions about my whereabouts. He was probably too occupied with Becky to notice anything amiss. Their weekend itinerary, which I'd discovered in their emails, Included a private wine tasting this afternoon. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Moving companies arrived in a carefully orchestrated sequence. Each truck contained specific items I'd secretly packed and stored over the past weeks: my personal belongings, my office equipment, select pieces of furniture that were mine alone. The movers worked efficiently, following my detailed instructions about where each item belonged. Standing in the kitchen, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. This room, with its outdated appliances and worn countertops, had been a major selling point for Becky. Her design plans, detailed in emails to James, called for a complete renovation. Instead, I would restore it to its original glory, maintaining the historic character that made this house special. The garden, overgrown but full of potential, beckoned me outside. Walking the grounds, I could see past the tangled vegetation to the bones of something magnificent. James and Becky had planned to modernize it, remove the heritage roses and century-old fruit trees. My vision was different: restore, nurture, allow the garden's original beauty to re-emerge. As darkness fell, the house began to feel like mine. Each room I entered responded to my presence, lights illuminating pathways that felt predestined. The creaks and settling sounds of the old house seemed welcoming rather than eerie. This space, which had featured so prominently in James's dreams of future success, was transforming into something entirely different, a monument to resilience. My last task of the day was setting up my new home office. The antique desk, positioned perfectly in front of the bay window, held my laptop like it had been waiting for it. As I connected to the newly installed Wi-Fi network, an email notification appeared, the final confirmation from my attorney that everything was properly recorded. The mansion was officially, irrevocably mine. The first night in a new home is always memorable, but this was something more. Each creak of the floorboards, each whisper of wind through the old windows, felt like conversation. The house seemed to be sharing its secrets, telling me stories of other lives, other changes, other transformations that had happened within these walls. Lying in the master bedroom, my bedroom now, I imagined James and Becky in Napa, enjoying their stolen weekend, completely unaware that their carefully laid plans were unraveling. Tomorrow they would return, expecting to continue their charade. Instead, they would find their future had been claimed by someone else. Sleep came easily that night, deep and peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in months. The mansion settled around me like a protective embrace, its solid presence a reminder that I had taken control of my own story. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own confrontations. But for now, in this moment, I had made the first move in a game James didn't even know we were playing. Sunday evening brought Seattle's typical misty rain, softening the edges of the Victorian mansion's silhouette as I waited. James's flight from Napa would be landing soon. He didn't know I had tracked his actual flight instead of the fictional. Portland won, just as he didn't know I was sitting in his dream home, watching the security cameras, waiting for the inevitable moment of his arrival. The text came at 7:42 p.m. Just landed in Portland. Conference was great. Heading home soon. Another lie to add to the collection. I knew he had just landed at SeaTac with Becky, their romantic weekend in Napa coming to an end. The security? Footage showed their shared Uber dropping her off first before continuing toward our condo. I imagined their goodbye kiss, their whispered promises, their plans for their next rendezvous. I'd positioned myself strategically in the mansion's library, seated in a vintage leather armchair facing the entrance. The room's dark wood paneling and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves created the perfect atmosphere for what was to come. On the antique desk beside me lay the property deed, placement intentional, corners aligned precisely with the desk's edge. The security system chimed at 8:17 p.m., motion detected at the front gate. James's car, easily recognizable on the camera feed, pulled up to the entrance. He'd noticed my car in the circular driveway, his brake lights flaring as he stopped. Abruptly. I watched through the security feed as he sat there, probably trying to make sense of why my car would be at the mansion he'd been coveting for years. His footsteps on the porch echoed through the quiet house. The sound of his key in the lock, followed by confusion when it wouldn't turn. Then the doorbell, its antique chime reverberating through the halls. I pressed the intercom button, my voice steady. "Come in, James. The door's unlocked." He stepped into the foyer, his designer shoes clicking on the hardwood floors. I could track his progress through the house by sound alone. The hesitation in his steps, the way he paused at intersections, unsure which way to turn. "Sarah?" His voice carried a mix of confusion and something else. Worry, perhaps, or fear. "In the library," I called out, my tone casual, as if this were any ordinary evening. When he appeared in the doorway, his face was a study in conflicting emotions, confusion, recognition, desire for the house he'd dreamed of owning, and slowly dawning realization that something was very wrong. "What are you doing here?" he asked, still hovering in the doorway. His suit was slightly rumpled from the flight, his collar crooked, signs of a hasty redressing, no doubt. The faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume clung to him, mingling with the cabin air of a long flight. "I could ask you the same thing, James. How was Portland?" I kept my voice light, watching as he processed the trap he'd walked into. "Or should I say Napa? I hear French Laundry is lovely this time of year, though I suppose Becky would know more about that than I would." The color drained from his face, but true to form, he tried to maintain control. "I don't know what you're talking about. The conference—" "Stop!" My voice cut through his beginning lie like a blade. "The lying stops now." I gestured to the deed on the desk. "You might want to take a look at this." He moved forward, designer shoes silent now on the oriental rug. I watched his eyes scan the document, watched the moment he understood. His dream home, the mansion he'd coveted for so long, now belonged to me. The realization hit him in waves. First the property transfer, then the date, then the full implication of what it all meant. "You can't do this," he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew, just as I did, that I already had. "I can," and I did. I stood, enjoying the way he took an involuntary step back. "While you were sharing wine and secrets with Becky, I was signing the papers. Funny how life works out sometimes, isn't it?" His face hardened, the mask of control slipping back into place. "This is ridiculous. You're being emotional. We can talk about this." "Talk?" I laughed, the sound echoing off the library's high ceiling. "Like you talked to me about Becky? About your plans to renovate this house together? About the future? You were planning while pretending to be a devoted husband?" He paled further, and I knew I'd hit my mark. "How did you know?" I moved to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thick folder. "I know everything, James. The hotels, the gifts, the secret meetings. I know about the renovation plans you made with her, the color schemes you chose, the future you mapped, out in my home." "Our home," he corrected automatically, reaching for the deed again. "No." I pulled it away from his grasp. "My home. Bought with my separate assets, closed while you were with your mistress. Quite poetic, don't you think?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Now it just seemed theatrical, another part of his endless performance. "Sarah, be reasonable. We can work this out. Whatever you think No, 8 months. I cut him off again. 8 months of lies, of sneaking around, of making me feel like I was crazy for suspecting something was wrong. 8 months of planning your future in this house with another woman. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken accusations. Outside, the rain had intensified, drumming against the library's stained glass windows. The sound seemed to emphasize the finality of the moment, the washing away of pretense. "The locks have been changed," I continued, my voice steady. "The security codes are new. Your key won't work here. Not that it matters, since this house will never be yours. I've made sure of that." He started to speak, stopped, tried again. "You're making a mistake. This isn't you. You're not vindictive like this." "You're right." I smiled, and I saw him flinch slightly at the expression. "The Sarah you knew, the one who trusted you, who believed in you, who supported your dreams, she wouldn't have done this." "But that Sarah doesn't exist anymore. You killed her, James, with every lie, every betrayal, every secret meeting with Becky." The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9 times, its deep tones reverberating through the house. James jumped, slightly at the sound, his composure cracking further. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Want?" I picked up the deed, ran my fingers along its edges. "I have what I want. Your dream house, your perfect future, your carefully laid plans. They're all mine now. You and Becky will have to find somewhere else to play house." His face darkened with anger. "You think this makes you clever? You think this makes everything even?" "No," I replied calmly. "Nothing could make this even. But watching you lose the one thing you wanted most? That's a start. The divorce papers will be delivered to your office tomorrow morning. I suggest you read them carefully. Now please leave my house." Truth spreads like wildfire in Seattle's real estate circles. By Monday morning, the story had already begun making its rounds through the carefully manicured offices of downtown's luxury property firms. The prestigious Victorian mansion on Queen Anne Hill, the crown jewel of the spring market, had been sold, not to a developer or foreign investor, but to Sarah Mitchell, wife of prominent real estate developer James Anderson. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. As James walked into his office that morning, his secretary's face told him everything he needed to know. The whispers followed him down the hallway, past conference rooms where conversations suddenly hushed at his approach. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues, each one carefully worded but carrying the same underlying message. They knew. Becky's panic manifested in a flood of texts and missed calls. What's happening? Why is everyone talking? About the house? James, please call me. Each message more desperate than the last. The carefully constructed facade of their professional relationship crumbled as fear took over. Her final message said it all. They're asking me to clean out my desk. The truth about their affair emerged in fragments, each revelation more damaging than the last. The administrative assistant who had helped book their romantic getaways came forward, sharing details about hotel reservations and intimate dinners. The junior partner who had covered for James during his business trips admitted to the deception. Even the barista at their favorite coffee shop had a story to tell. In the sleek downtown office where Becky had built her reputation as an interior designer, the atmosphere turned glacial. Clients, already uncomfortable with the scandal, began pulling their projects. Her carefully curated Instagram feed, once filled with design inspiration and project updates, went silent. The last post, a Napa Valley sunset, stood as a final testament to her undoing. The Victorian mansion became a symbol of poetic justice in Seattle's social circles. Women whispered about it over wine at charity events, sharing knowing looks and quiet congratulations. Men shifted uncomfortably in their private clubs, wondering if their own secrets were as vulnerable. The story grew with each retelling, transforming, from scandal to legend. Margaret Chen's office received 17 calls that week from wives seeking consultations. The story had struck a chord, awakening something in women who had ignored their own suspicions for too long. Each one asked about the mansion, about how Sarah had managed to secure it right from under her husband's nose. The tale of revenge through real estate became a blueprint for empowerment. Diana, the real estate agent, found herself in high demand. Her phone rang constantly with calls from other agents wanting to know how she had orchestrated the sale so discreetly. She maintained her professional silence, but her reputation soared. Everyone wanted to work with the agent who had helped orchestrate the most talked-about property transaction of the year. At James's firm, the partners called an emergency meeting. The scandal had begun affecting business, with potential clients expressing concerns about working with a company whose leading developer had shown such poor judgment. The message was clear. James's position was becoming untenable. His dream of making partner, once seemingly guaranteed, evaporated in the harsh light of public scrutiny. The truth about the house's purchase leaked out in details that made James's humiliation complete. How Sarah had used her own money, carefully separated from their joint assets. How she had timed the closing to coincide with his romantic getaway. How she had managed to secure the property for less than asking price, demonstrating a business acumen that surprised everyone, except those who had underestimated her. Becky's design plans for the mansion, once shared so enthusiastically, with James became a source of particular embarrassment. The digital trail of their correspondence revealed intimate details of their planned future together. The master suite they would share, the nursery they had discussed, the garden where they would host summer parties. Each revelation twisted the knife deeper, not just for James, but for his mistress as well. The professional fallout was swift and merciless. Clients began distancing themselves from both James and Becky. Their industry reputations, built over years of careful networking and project successes, unraveled in a matter of days. The whispers in corporate hallways turned into concrete actions, project reassignments, canceled contracts, withdrawn invitations to industry events. James's attempts to control the narrative failed spectacularly. His initial story, that the house purchase was a misunderstanding, that his relationship with Becky was purely professional, collapsed under the weight of evidence. Emails, text messages, and hotel receipts painted a picture that no amount of explanation could justify. The truth, once exposed, took on a life of its own. The Victorian mansion itself seemed to revel in the drama. Its windows gleamed in the spring sunlight, its gardens began to bloom under Sarah's care. Neighbors reported seeing lights in different rooms each evening, as if the house was coming back to life. The property that had been meant to showcase James's success instead became a monument to his failure. In the quiet moments between revelations, Sarah received unexpected support from surprising quarters. The wives of James's colleagues, women who had played the same social games and attended the same charity functions, began reaching out. Some shared their own stories of suspicion and betrayal. Others simply offered solidarity, understanding the courage it had taken to turn the tables so completely. The truth about James and Becky's affair exposed more than just their relationship. It revealed the cracks in the foundation of Seattle's real estate elite, the careful calculations behind power couples and professional partnerships. The scandal became a mirror, reflecting uncomfortable truths back to those who had maintained their own careful facades. Real estate listings throughout the city took on new significance. Properties that had once been simple investments became potential weapons in the arsenal of wronged spouses. The Victorian mansion started a trend. Women began looking at property not just as homes or investments, but as instruments of justice and independence. As the truth continued to unfold, Sarah remained above the fray, letting the facts speak for themselves. She didn't need to defend her actions or explain her choices. The evidence did that for her. Each new revelation confirmed what she had known all along, that the best revenge wasn't in destroying what James had, but in claiming what he wanted most. Spring bloomed in the Victorian mansion's garden, bringing with it an unexpected sense of peace. Morning light streamed through the restored stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscope patterns across the hardwood floors where I sat, sipping coffee and watching the city wake up. Gone was the constant anxiety, the need to check James's schedule, to monitor his movements, to maintain the facade of a perfect wife. In its place, a profound sense of freedom took root. The transformation wasn't just in my surroundings, it was in me. Each morning, I found myself lingering longer at the antique vanity, really seeing myself for the first time in years. The woman in the mirror had changed. She stood straighter, smiled more freely, carried herself with a confidence that came from somewhere deeper than revenge. This wasn't just about winning the house, it was about reclaiming myself. My work took on new dimensions as well. The marketing campaigns I developed began showing more edge, more creativity. Clients noticed the change, commenting on the fresh perspective I brought to projects. Without the constant drain of maintaining James's illusions, my energy flowed into building something of my own. The promotion I'd been hesitant to pursue suddenly seemed within reach. The house itself became a project of passion rather than possession. Instead of following Becky's modernization plans, I worked with local historians to restore original features. Each discovered detail: a hidden pocket door, original wallpaper preserved behind built-in cabinets, century-old rose bushes emerging from overgrown gardens. Felt like a gift from the house itself. This wasn't about creating a showcase. It was about honoring history while building a future. Social events, once exercises in careful performance, transformed into genuine pleasures. I hosted small dinner parties in the formal dining room, filling the space with laughter and honest conversation. Women who had been mere acquaintances became true friends, drawn together by shared experiences and the understanding that strength often comes from unexpected places. The garden became my sanctuary, a place where transformation was visible in every bloom and new shoot. I spent weekends clearing decades of neglect, uncovering garden paths and coaxing heritage plants back to life. Each callus on my hands, each ache in my muscles felt like badges of honor, proof that I was building something real, something lasting. My relationship with time changed profoundly. No more rushing to accommodate James's schedule, no more carefully orchestrated appearances at his business functions. My days became my own, filled with choices that reflected my interests, my passions. I took art classes in the mansion's sunroom, started a book club in the library, practiced yoga on the wraparound porch at sunrise. The changing seasons brought physical changes to match the emotional ones. I cut my hair, donated the designer clothes James had always insisted I wear, started dressing in ways that felt authentic rather than expected. Each small change reinforced the larger transformation. I wasn't just occupying a different space. I was becoming a different person. Professional connections shifted and deepened. Women in Seattle's business community reached out, not to gossip about the scandal, but to collaborate on projects, to share opportunities, to build networks based on mutual respect rather than social obligation. My marketing expertise combined with their various specialties created unexpected synergies, leading to projects that excited and challenged me. Even my relationship with money transformed. No more joint accounts, no more deferring to James's financial decisions. I learned to trust my instincts, to make investment choices that aligned with my values. The mansion, initially a tool of revenge, became a sound financial decision as property values in the neighborhood continued to rise. The empty rooms of the mansion gradually filled with meaning beyond their grand proportions. The library, once intended as James's trophy room, became a space where local women's groups could meet and organize. The formal parlor hosted networking events for female entrepreneurs. Each space found new purpose, reflecting not just my transformation, but the ripple effects it had created in the community. Sleep came easier in my new home. untroubled by the weight of suspicion and pretense. The master bedroom, which James and Becky had planned to remake in their image, became a peaceful retreat decorated with artwork from local female artists. The room's bay window became my favorite spot for watching storms roll in across the Sound, each flash of lightning illuminating another facet of my new life. My voice, once carefully modulated to avoid disrupting James's carefully constructed world, grew stronger. I found myself speaking up in meetings, challenging conventional wisdom, offering perspectives that might have once seemed too bold. The confidence that came from taking control of my own story spilled over into every aspect of my life. The mansion's renovation became a metaphor for my own rebuilding. Like the layers of old wallpaper we carefully preserved, each phase of my life remained part of who I was, but no longer defined who I could become. The process wasn't about erasing the past, but about building something new while honoring the journey that brought me here. Relationships with family and old friends deepened as I allowed myself to be more authentic, more vulnerable. Sunday brunches with my sister, once perfunctory events filled with careful small talk, became lengthy, honest conversations about life, dreams, and the courage to change. Friends who had drifted away during my marriage began returning, drawn by the energy of transformation. The view from the mansion's Widow's Walk took on new significance. Standing there at sunset, watching the city lights emerge, I could see the sweep of my life laid out before me. Not as a series of reactions to James's choices, but as a landscape of possibilities I was finally free to explore. Each twinkling light represented a potential adventure, a new connection, a chance to continue growing. Exercise, once a chore undertaken to maintain the image James expected, became a joy. Morning runs through the neighborhood felt like victory laps. Yoga on the mansion's lawn connected me to both my body and the historic ground beneath my feet. Every movement became an expression of freedom rather than obligation. Most profoundly, my relationship with myself underwent the deepest transformation. The constant self-doubt, the wondering if I was enough, the careful monitoring of every word and gesture, all fell away like autumn leaves, revealing the strong core that had been there all along. In claiming the mansion, I had found something far more valuable than revenge. I had found myself. 1 year after claiming the Victorian mansion, I stood in the restored garden, hosting a different kind of housewarming. Women from across Seattle gathered on the terraced lawn, each with their own story of transformation. Some had left toxic relationships. Others had started their own businesses, and many had found the courage to reshape their lives in ways both small and profound. The mansion, once a symbol of James's ambition, had become a beacon of empowerment. The last I heard, James had relocated to Portland, his reputation in Seattle's real estate circles too damaged to salvage. Becky had moved back east, her interior design business never recovering from the scandal. Their dream of the perfect life in the Victorian mansion had evaporated like morning mist over Puget Sound, leaving behind only lessons about the true cost of betrayal. My marketing firm promoted me to creative director, impressed by the innovative campaigns I'd developed over the past year. The confidence I'd found in standing up to James translated into bold professional moves that caught the industry's attention. Client meetings now took place in the mansion's restored library, where the grandeur of old Seattle provided the perfect backdrop for modern business ventures. The house itself flourished under my care. Local preservation societies praised the authentic restoration work, featuring the mansion in their annual Historic Homes tour. Each room told a story, not of James's thwarted ambitions, but of Seattle's rich history and the power of renewal. The garden's heritage roses bloomed again, their fragrance a reminder that beauty often survives long after those who planted them are gone. Romance found me again, unexpectedly and on my own terms. Not in grand gestures or carefully orchestrated moments, but in genuine connections formed through shared interests and mutual respect. The mansion's dinner parties and cultural events attracted people who valued substance over appearance, authenticity over performance. dating became an exploration rather than a performance. The divorce settlement finally concluded, surprising. Everyone with its smoothness. James, perhaps recognizing the futility of fighting, agreed to terms without the expected battle. His only request was that I not write a book about what happened. Little did he know that my story would spread in ways far more powerful than any memoir, through the whispered conversations of women inspired to take control of their own lives. My sister moved into the carriage house, converting it into a photography studio. Her presence added another layer of security and companionship, transforming the property into a true family compound. Sunday brunches on the veranda became a tradition, filled with laughter and honest conversation about life's challenges and triumphs. The mansion's renovation project won several preservation awards, but the real victory was in the community it created. Monthly workshops in the ballroom helped women navigate everything from financial independence to emotional healing. The house became a gathering place for those seeking to rewrite their own stories, its grand rooms echoing with the sound of dreams being rebuilt. Financial independence brought unexpected opportunities. I started a foundation supporting women, entrepreneurs, using the mansion's restored conservatory for networking events and mentorship programs. The money that had once been earmarked for James's dream home renovations now funded scholarships and startup grants for women breaking free from their own gilded cages. Seattle's social landscape shifted subtly in the wake of my story. Other wives began examining their marriages more closely, asking questions about separate bank accounts and property ownership. Lawyers reported an uptick in women seeking advice about protecting their assets. The ripple effects of one act of empowerment spread far beyond the mansion's wrought iron gates. The house's historic character proved to be its greatest asset. Original features we preserved, the speaking tubes, dumbwaiters, and hidden passages, became conversation pieces during charity events. Each architectural detail told a story of innovation and adaptation, reminding visitors that everything old could be made new again without losing its essential character. My morning routine evolved into a celebration of independence. Coffee on the widow's walk, watching sunrise paint the sound in shades of possibility. Yoga in the garden room, strength flowing through poses that would have once seemed impossible. Every moment in the mansion became an affirmation of choices made and challenges overcome. The Victorian's spacious rooms hosted workshops and seminars teaching financial literacy and property investment strategies to women from all walks of life. My experience buying the mansion became a case study in utilizing separate assets and timing opportunities. Knowledge, I discovered, was the most powerful form of independence. Local artists approached me about using the mansion's unique spaces for exhibitions and performances. The grand staircase became a backdrop for photography sessions celebrating women's transformation stories. The ballroom hosted dance classes, where women learned to trust their own rhythm. Every room vibrated with creative energy and purpose. As autumn painted the garden in shades of gold and crimson, I realized that the mansion had given me far more than revenge. It had provided a platform for growth, a space for healing, and a foundation for helping others find their strength. The dream house James had coveted became something far more valuable, a symbol of resilience and renewal. Looking out over the sound from the mansion's highest window, I could see the future stretching out before me, bright with possibility. The house that was meant to be James's crowning achievement had become my launching pad, propelling me toward a life richer and more authentic than any I could have imagined during my married years. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.